You know, life's a funny thing. Carl Froch, if we remember young Carl Froch, when he was chasing JC, known as Joe Calzaghe, was chasing him to get a super fight with him and Joe Calzaghe. Carl Froch was relatively unknown. Joe Calzaghe was a worldwide superstar in terms of his boxing ability, and you know, he had fought Hopkins, he had fought Roy Jones Jr., he had fought Jeff Lacey, he had fought Michael Kessler, and you know, people were, you know, talking about Calzaghe, sorry. But Froch wanted a taste of it. He wanted to face Joe Calzaghe, and if you remember, you know, Calzaghe went into retirement, and that was the rest of that. Even then, every so often, Froch would sneak in the old snide comment about JC, and I'm not going to talk about JC, and I'd fight JC, and me and JC should fight. You know, Froch almost had an addiction and a fatal attraction with Joe Calzaghe, if you remember earlier in his career when he wasn't getting the attention. And every so often he'd throw Joe Calzaghe's name in. Since then, you know, the Joe Calzaghe talk has stopped because Froch has made his own sort of legacy. 3-time world champion, fought in Super 6. A beat fortunate in some of the decisions. The Darrell fight was a questionable fight. You know, and of course before the Super 6, remember the Jermaine Taylor fight where Froch was being totally outboxed, and Jermaine Taylor was on the verge of getting the knockout, but Froch showed his heart, and of course Taylor, known to gas, and he gassed in the super middleweight division, and of course Froch, being the bigger man, took Jermaine Taylor out. Now we have a situation where the three-time super middleweight champion of the world, and would like to boast and brag and tell you that he's better than JC. It's funny how the world is and how it kind of comes around, spins 360. Because a young contender in the name of George Groves challenged Carl Froch. And Carl Froch knew what it felt like to be rejected and not to be looked upon or frowned upon or to be ignored. Because JC was chasing the big fights. So now how Carl Froch is, he says, you know what? I'll fight George Groves because I'm a warrior and I'm the best in Britain and blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. Let me tell you something. Carl Froch and George Groves had sparred previously beforehand, and the story I heard, it's from a good source, is that Carl Froch was dropped by George Groves. The other story I heard was that George Groves dropped Carl Froch in sparring, and Froch got up and it became an all-out war in sparring. So from what I understand, so these two have known each other for a while, and it's been a bit of bad blood for a while. This is no hype. This is there's some serious bad blood there. And just how George Groves as well was able to know how to get under Carl Froch's skin and get to him and know where his mental weaknesses were. And as you saw in the fight, he knew exactly how to deal with Carl Froch. He said he'd hit him with a double right hand, and he did that in the first round. Groves was doing basically whatever the hell he pleased until Froch really started putting some pressure on him. Now, and if you remember, Groves dropped Carl hard in the first round. Here's a few points to consider. Now Groves is the man shouting from the top, I want Carl Froch, I want Carl Froch, I want a rematch, I want a rematch, I want a rematch. Now, is Carl going to give him the rematch? Is he going to do a JC and go and chase the big fights? In Carl's mind, or he'd like to let you know and tell you that, you know, he beat George Groves, why does he need to have the rematch? Now, I challenge any boxing fan to go back and look at the fight, the last bit of the fight, where after the fight, where the, you know, Froch comes across to the ring and he looks at somebody and he like gives a sigh of relief as if to say, shit, that was really close, I almost blew it. So Froch knows himself that he was on the verge of losing a world title there. He knew that himself. You think he really wants to get back in the ring against George Groves? This is a man that's calculated in everything that he does, and says that, you know, he's got a diary. Froch likes to tell you all the time about that black book and how many miles he's clocked and this and that and how many times he's been on his bicycle, and he's got it. He says he's getting better, he's getting fitter, he's getting faster, blah, 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 blah. But let me tell you something. You can't keep getting hit on the chin the way Froch is getting hit on his chin. He's getting slower, and you can't keep having walls like the way Froch is having walls. And guess what now? The IBF have ordered Carl Froch to make a defence against George Groves within 90 days. So what are you going to do, Carl? Are you going to vacate the IBF and go on and fight Chavez? Or are you actually going to turn around and fight George Groves? I don't know. Why are you still boxing, Carl? Why are you still boxing? Yeah, for me, fans will say, oh yeah, Carl should still fight. But why? You're going to go and fight Chavez for what? For what? Martinez put a beating on him. To be honest, only last round he did something. What's so big about Chavez? And you know, Chavez has a good chance of beating Froch. To be honest, Froch is talking about how he won't move up to light heavyweight. But when you look at the size of Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., he's massive. He'll probably come into ring that night fighting as a cruiserweight. So Froch won't move up 4 or 5 pounds to light heavyweight. But he'll go and fight Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Right. Of course you will, Carl. Right. So you were taunting JC about not fighting, him being a coward. If you go now and not fight George Groves, then you will be forever called a coward. You know, I know from what I saw when Froch was ringside, he knew he got away with the skin of his teeth, and that referee helped him that night, I think, to be honest. But then George Groves himself didn't do himself any favours, the way he was tucking up and kind of curling away when the punch was being thrown. In any case, is there going to rematch? What do you think? Should there be a rematch? Personally, I'd like to see Carl Froch retire. Retire undefeated as world champion in terms of, you know, your championship reign. Just retire. Retire, have your 3 belts, retire, and let another generation get on with it. Do you understand? Or just say, you know what? I'm having a farewell fight, but it's not George Groves. I'm having a farewell fight, and that's it. And to hell with it. You know, I don't know. A third fight of Mikhail Kessler? I don't know. I personally don't see him fight Chavez. I don't see much point in fighting Chavez. But then he thinks he's going to make a lot of money fighting Chavez. So, is he going to vacate the title or